Now, you mentioned after I'd said about Death Stranding there, Scott, that Death Stranding may be the sequel to Blade 2, which is good because there wasn't a sequel to Blade 2, so this episode ends now. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button.
Good. I'm glad we've got nothing more to talk about. Bye.
All right, let's talk about Blade Trinity then.
No.
Yes.
No. I protest.
Yes. Blade Trinity is very much the point at which the wheels fall off, not just for this franchise, but for Snipes' career in general. So as such, I'm not sure it's worth spending all that much time on Blade Trinity, but here we go. We'll try and keep this to minimum. Snipes returns, of course, alongside Christopherson, but they're set up by those naughty vampires, with Blade killing a human familiar being caught on camera, sparking an FBI manhunt for him. Also, weirdly at this point, they make a point about him not trying to kill humans, despite that not being a problem in any of the other films. But consistency and logic were apparently not high on David Goyer's priorities for Trinity. Here he directs as well as writes. The other prong in the vampire's plan, here headed by Parker Posey's Danica Talos, with WWF wrestler and French-Canadian aristocrat Hunter Hearst Helmsley in tow, is to resurrect Dominic Purcell's Dracula, or Drake as we're calling him, for a very good reason, maybe? They managed to do this in short order, and Blade & Co. must stop them. Ah yes, the Co. part of that, who busted Blade out of FBI jail earlier. Whistler has been quietly setting up other cells of vampire hunters, and here we have a new team to get acquainted with. However, as they are mostly fridged before they've had more than 3 lines each, let's restrict ourselves to Whistler's daughter Abigail, played by Jessica Biel, and ex-vampire Hannibal King, played by Ryan Reynolds.
Is right.
Yes. And, well, so it goes. And I suppose the general setup's not all that much worse than other films, but it's just spread much thinner across way too many characters in a way that I just mentioned with Blade 2, which does it a lot better. Here, Dracula's ability to shapeshift into other forms is seemingly only used to confuse the audience and not the characters in the films, which is a bit of a head-scratcher. And in a film that's already struggling to find the time to give its villains much of an identity, it's a complication it can ill afford. The action here is much less interesting, in no small part because a lot of it is being handled by Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds, who are trying their best but just aren't as convincing as Snipes. However, Snipes was, for whatever reason, barely playing ball on set, only deigning to come on set for close-ups, with his stand-in probably being on camera more than he is in this final cut, and that, apparently, meant that a lot of the action and trademark cutting barbs instead went to Ryan Reynolds, who here is playing essentially the alpha test version of Deadpool. Mm-hmm. Watching it this time, I don't know, it was a strange kind of bifurcation, because I recognised the lines that he was saying in some way ought to have been amusing me, but it just seems that when they come out of Ryan Reynolds' face, they are stripped of all humour. And maybe if he was in some kind of mask where I couldn't see that face, it would work. And
no,
just the same. Now, actually, when I went back to watch this, it's not a complete disaster, because when Snipes does show up, he does bring with him flashes of why I liked all the other films. In the main, the reason why I liked the other films was it has a lot of Wesley Snipes in it, and the absence of this is pretty much the reason I don't like Blade Trinity, and the fact that it just can't sustain itself. Yeah, the franchise in general just is basically a Wesley Snipes vehicle, and when Snipes is not at the wheel, it just drives over a cliff. It is not the world's worst film, but it's so far below the last two in terms of fun and competence that I couldn't even recommend this to completionists. It's, as I say, the difficulties on set is probably as much as anything why Snipes' star started falling, and the tax revelations a few years later probably was no help with that, as going through jail tends not to be great for your career. Yeah, so it's a sad, not the exact end, but it was a premature end of the man's of the prime of his career, and it's a sad note to go out on, at least in that terms. I hope that in future he can pick up some more work. I've not seen it, but I see from the credits at least he's started picking up the odd bit roles in stuff like Chirac and the Spike Lee film and some other things, so hopefully we can see a bit more of his dramatic side come to the fore. But yes, in terms of an end to his action films, and let's not count all of the sort of financially driven trash that he's been making of late, this is just a sad end to a franchise that I was very fond of, and this is in no way lives up to it. not recommended at all.
Yeah, I mean, I was protesting rather a lot before you introduced it, Scott, but I don't really feel that. It's just really dull. As you say, that there are considerably worse films. This one's just boring, and I was honestly struggling to keep my attention on it. Was my biggest problem. The other films I've watched where like I can watch and I'll just get angry or filled with hate or other things, or just tear it to parts, tear it to pieces. Honestly, I was largely for the whole film. I kept thinking, wait, I'm confused about the movie. So the cops knew internal affairs was setting them up.
Yeah.
Which actually was my go-to for being bored by a movie for years. I had forgotten about it until last night. But yes, I just channeled good old Homer there. And part of the problem is it's an action film that has not an awful lot of action in it for a lot of the part, and it's mostly been replaced with exposition, and a bit more exposition.
Yeah.
None of which is interesting. And kind of slightly odd tone to it. I mean, the other two films are a bit camp, a bit cheesy, but they're not, aside from the moments of Blade doing a kind of silly pose or something I mentioned earlier, they're not goofy or cartoonish, whereas this is. Like, when he gets brought into this group that, you know, for some reason has Whistler's daughter, okay, that was worthwhile and necessary, but gets brought into that, and they basically feel like the Scooby Gang.
Yeah.
And then you've got the bickering and almost comically inept vampires. It feels like a completely different series from the first two.
Yeah.
And I really like Parker Posey. Not even she can really save that. It's a strange thing with her silly little vampire dog thing.
Yeah.
Reaper dog, I guess. And that big goofy looking fella who's partly a wrestler.
Yeah. Triple H. Paul Levis-Q someone or other, but yes, yeah. Him.
Scott, stop. You're just saying words to me that have no meaning for my ears at all. You tell me he's a wrestler, I'll believe you. But he's a big sort of goofy...
Yeah, Patton Oswalt, that's who it was, yeah.
This big kind of goofy looking guy who can't act. To be fair to him, I've seen worse, but who just like, he feels almost kind of pantomime or something.
Yeah, he's
fit in this film at all.
He's no The Rock. He's following the same kind of role that was basically like the first film had that Donald Rogue.
Rogue.
Yeah, his kind of character. It's that sort of archetype, but just sort of slightly ineptly done.
Yeah. And you know what? If you were making a He-Man film again and you wanted to cast Ram Man, he'd be perfect for the role. He doesn't fit in Blade. Yeah, so you've got that. Then you've got, well, Ryan Reynolds, who is as Ryan Reynolds normally is, which is tiresome.
Yes.
And if you put a mask on him while he's saying these things, you just have a tiresome person in a mask, because I do not like Deadpool, particularly the second one, which is an appalling film. Yeah, I don't get on with Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
I just find him irritating and tiresome.
Yeah.
Then, I don't know, again, it's a film with sort of lots of little bits that just add up to being really, really annoying. Like, for some reason too, they mention this idea that they've got lots and lots of sleeper cells who are doing the things that Blade's doing. Okay, that could be interesting. He's one person, there are vampires, he can't do it all. That's interesting. Then Blade asks a quite pertinent question, how are you funding this? Because we found out in the first film, he's funding his by robbing the vampires when he kills them.
Yeah.
And using their like watches to buy serum or to melt down for the silver and stuff that he needs. He goes, how are you funding this? And then Mr. Reynolds quips that he's got a lot of rich boyfriends. Okay. Oh, no, I'm joking. And so you're not going to answer the question. And it's, unless I missed it, which is possible because I was struggling to concentrate on this, but never brought up for the rest of the film. So they think to ask the question, but never bother to answer it.
Yeah.
That was weird. But I suppose the biggest problem with the film, apart from, it taking the time for some reason to show Jessica Biel filling up her iPod, that was well worth it, is it's the villain. So yeah, for some reason he's called Drake and a bunch of other things, as well as just being called Dracula. And it's, I don't know, there's something potentially interesting there. Even if like it feels now, although obviously this comes well before, it feels a bit like X-Men Apocalypse at the start.
Yeah.
Digging up the ancient god creature to help them and it not quite going to plan. There's something there, like there's vampires all around the world, and there's been some hints in the last two films that are kind of, I guess, competing clans or something like that you might call it, but that they would all be subservient to Dracula, and that Dracula is like the real boogeyman even for vampires, and an action comic book film, maybe not the place to do it, but there's some ideas there that you could maybe do something a bit interesting, that either like the vampire's really scared of him and it's sort of he's a real there in his thrall, and that could be kind of interesting, and then for some reason they just completely relegate him to basically a secondary character. It's so strange. I sort of hinted at that, maybe didn't explain it all that well, but yeah, there's too many bad guys in it, and none of them are actually well defined enough for anything like for this film to succeed. And yeah, it really doesn't help himself by Dracula shape-shifting at points. Like maybe it's because, like yourself, my attention was wandering quite a lot during this, but this is a film where they finally apparently kill Whistler, but he comes back for some reason to kill off everyone in the Scooby Gang for the most part. And I was, when I watched it through this time, I was kind of scratching my head as how did that happen and why did it happen? And then I was reading when I was trying to put my notes together. Apparently that's supposed to be Dracula who is shapeshifted to do that for no reason, because most of the people, what benefit would it be? He's not like walking up to the gates and going, "Hello, I am Whistler," and then stabbing people. He's sneaking in. You don't see he silently infiltrates and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't actually reveal himself to anyone as Whistler. So why bother doing it other than to confuse people? I mean, maybe I missed that scene where he was transforming or something, but I just didn't get it at all. It was like, oh, I shouldn't need like outside sources to tell me what's going on in a film this dumb. You know what I mean? It's just ineptly handled. When Chris Christopherson appears at first, I thought, oh, he wasn't dead then. But no, it's really obvious really quickly after that it's Dracula, because he changes into like those two other people. In that same sequence.
Yeah.
So it's like it's obviously him, but it's like, yeah, but why?
There's no reason for it to happen. Why would
he doesn't? He doesn't need to fool Ryan Reynolds. He's lying in bed with a big puncture wound in his chest.
Yes.
It's not like he needs to trick him, and yeah, I don't. They don't seem to know what to do with that character, and so there's no reason for him to be there.
Yeah.
Also, as well as, but not go to watch it because I know my propensity for nitpicking. But why? How does his shape-shifting ability extend to clothing?
Yes. It just does, right? It just does.
The problem too is it's Dracula, right? So he should be either beautiful or terrifying or in some way kind of like visually charismatic, and they got this really boring Barry Ferguson looking mofo who's just the most generic looking man I think I've ever seen.
Yes.
If maybe he looks like the standard male shepherd model from Mass Effect.
Yes, he does actually. Yes,
but he's just, so he doesn't look in any way kind of like visually captivating, which you think a character like Dracula should be. Yes. And then it doesn't help. It's like he's just, I'm not sure I'd say bad actor, but he's tremendously bland and dull.
Yeah.
He's apparently been in stuff like Prison Break before. I looked up in IMDb. This is the one and only thing I have ever seen him in that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
It's like here's dull, bland, ridiculously generic man as the most famous vampire of any story ever. Okay. That's odd. And then you basically relegate him to a secondary character for the rest of the film anyway. Did they just have Dracula in there just so they could have a scene where he walks into a shop full of Dracola and other Dracula things? Like, that doesn't work. That only works if people were aware that he was real and then he sort of become a laughingstock. Nobody thought Dracula was real.
Yeah.
It's a strange and confused film that yeah, it isn't bad enough to get particularly angry about, but I can barely care about the rest of it in any way at all.
Yeah, I'm left wondering how much of this, because Snipes and Goyer apparently had a very big falling out in this set, and Snipes wanted him to be sacked as director and didn't get that wish. It'd be interesting to know how much of Goyer's scripts for the previous two films went through unaltered, or if Norrington and Del Toro changed bits of it. I know Del Toro did chop and change a huge chunk of the last act of Blade 2, because he mentions that in some of the scenes. Whether Goyer with a free rein just needs someone to edit him a bit better, because clearly he did write the first two films and they were good, but apparently writing and directing the third was a stretch too far for him. So
apparently he has confessed himself that he's not good at writing dialogue and not good at writing character interaction.
That's your job.
Yeah, it was pretty significant for a screenwriter. Yes. And in the first film, a lot of the scenes, like, you didn't really know how to start or end, so they were just like, they talked to Wesley Snipes, and he came up with some idea, and they went, "Yeah, that seems good. Let's go with that." And I think that is sorely missing in Blade Trinity, particularly given some really odd lines have made it in. There's a couple that Jessica Biel in particular has, which is when she's talking about what happened. She says, "When I came of age, and I was born out of wedlock." Now, who talks like that? Is she from Dracula's time as well?
Yeah, bad. Very bad.
It's so strange.